that all you've got? You are wasting my time! You think you can just walk in here? This is my dojo!
Everyone in the gym loved watching Confidence, until confidence crossed the line into cruelty. On a humid Friday evening in Houston, Texas Iron Legacy Martial Arts was overflowing with students, parents, and local spectators. The sound of gloves striking heavy bags echoed through the building, while the sharp scent of disinfected, mixed with sweat, filled the air. Children in crisp white uniforms stretched along the bright blue mat. Teenagers practiced spinning kicks near the mirrors, and proud parents filled every aluminum bench with phones raised, eager to capture another social media moment. Near the center of the room stood the gym's biggest attraction, Darius Kane at 28 years old. Darius was a decorated black belt with regional championships, thousands of social media followers, and an ego that seemed to grow larger with every compliment. His highlight videos played non-stop on a television above the reception desk, showing spectacular knockouts, flashy combinations, and dramatic slow-motion celebrations. Around town, people admired his talent. Inside the gym, many feared his temper. Darius believed respect wasn't earned through character. He believed it was forced through intimidation. Every class followed the same pattern. He found the weakest student in the room, singled them out in front of everyone, and disguised humiliation as mental toughness. Parents rarely challenged him because they assumed his harshness was part of elite martial arts training. Some even applauded his methods, convincing themselves that confidence could only be built through embarrassment. The applause fed his arrogance. The louder the room became, the bigger his performance grew. Across the gym, tucked quietly beside the entrance, stood Officer Maya Brooks. She wasn't wearing a police uniform. She wasn't looking for attention. Dressed in dark blue jeans, white sneakers, and a simple gray hoodie, she looked like any hard-working American mother, bringing her child to an evening activity after a long week. Her badge remained secured inside her shoulder bag, completely hidden from everyone around her. Nobody recognized her. Nobody noticed the calm confidence in her posture. Nobody understood why her eyes never stopped scanning the room. For nearly 15 years, Maya had served as one of Houston's most respected police officers. Long before joining law enforcement, she had worn another uniform, one earned through discipline, sacrifice, and service to her country as a United States Marine. Years of military deployments and police work had taught her one lesson. She never forgot: the loudest person in the room was rarely the strongest. Real strength stayed quiet until it had no other choice. Standing beside her was her 14-year-old son, Ethan. Unlike his mother, Ethan hated being the center of attention. He was intelligent, respectful, and kind-hearted. He loved robotics, baseball, and helping elderly neighbors carry groceries. But confidence had never come naturally to him. Months of bullying at school had slowly chipped away at his belief in himself. His guidance counselor suggested martial arts as a way to rebuild discipline, self-respect, and courage. Maya agreed. Not because she wanted her son to learn how to fight, but because she wanted him to discover that real courage begins with self-control. As Ethan quietly filled out the trial membership form, Maya watched families laughing together around the lobby. Fathers adjusted their children's uniforms. Mothers encouraged nervous beginners with reassuring smiles. Younger siblings chased each other between folding chairs while upbeat music played softly through ceiling speakers. For a brief moment, it felt exactly like the kind of place she had hoped to find. Then she heard a voice slice through the building. "Did you come here to become champions or excuses?" Every conversation stopped instantly. Darius Kane strode across the training mats, with the confidence of a celebrity entering his own stage. Students straightened their backs before he even reached them. Assistant instructors laughed at his jokes before anyone else had the chance. Maya remained silent. She wasn't impressed by expensive trophies. She wasn't impressed by social media fame. She had spent too many years working alongside police officers, who quietly risked their lives every single shift. Without expecting applause, she respected people whose actions spoke louder than their voices. As Darius barked orders across the gym, Maya noticed something that most parents completely missed. None of the children smiled when he walked by. They obeyed him, but they didn't trust him. Maya rested one hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. As the trial class officially began, she leaned down just enough for her voice to reach only him. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone in this room," she said with a warm smile. "Just do your best, pay attention, and remember why we're here." Ethan nodded, though the nervousness on his face was impossible to hide. At 14, he stood taller than many boys his age. But confidence wasn't measured in inches. Months of being mocked by classmates had taught him to avoid eye contact and stay in the background whenever possible. Maya understood that pain better than anyone realized. As both a former United States Marine and a veteran Houston police officer, she had spent years helping teenagers whose confidence had been shattered by bullying, violence, and broken homes. She had watched young people transform. When just one adult believed in them, she hoped this gym could become that place for her son. The students lined up according to rank, while Darius paced slowly across the training floor, with his hands folded behind his back. "I don't care about excuses," he announced loudly. "The world doesn't reward weakness out there. Nobody cares about your feelings." Several parents nodded from the bleachers, as if they were listening to profound wisdom. Maya remained silent. She agreed that discipline mattered. She agreed that resilience mattered. But during her years in law enforcement, she had learned something far more important. Real leaders never confused discipline with humiliation. She had served alongside remarkable police officers, men and women who entered dangerous situations every day with courage, professionalism, and compassion. The best officers she knew never shouted. Simply because they had authority, they earned respect through fairness, patience, and self-control. Watching Darius, she sensed something entirely different. This wasn't leadership. It looked like performance. Warm-up drills began immediately. Children jogged around the mats before moving into jumping jacks, push, UPS, and basic footwork exercises. Ethan gave everything he had, despite clearly struggling to keep pace with students who had trained for years. His breathing became heavier. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Still, he refused to quit. Maya felt proud watching him continue without complaining. Across the room, however, Darius noticed something else. He noticed the newest student, an easy target. He walked directly toward Ethan before stopping only inches away. "What's your name, Ethan, sir?" "Louder, Ethan Brooks, sir." Darius looked him up and down before smirking. "You move like you've never played a sport in your life." Several teenagers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan lowered his eyes. "I'll fix that." Darius continued, "If you can keep up." A few nervous laughs spread through the class. Maya crossed her arms but said nothing. She believed Ethan needed room to overcome challenges on his own. One sarcastic comment wasn't enough to justify stepping in. The class transitioned into partner drills. Students practiced balance exercises, while assistant instructors walked between groups, making small corrections every time Ethan made a mistake. Darius seemed to appear beside him. "No wrong again. Lighter on your feet, you call that balance." The corrections themselves weren't unreasonable. The delivery was, each sentence came with a tone designed to embarrass rather than teach. Several parents looked toward Maya expecting some kind of reaction. Instead, she quietly observed. Years of police work had trained her to recognize patterns long before situations escalated, whether responding to domestic disputes, neighborhood conflicts, or public disturbances. She had learned that behavior always told a story. And Darius's story was becoming easier to read. He wasn't interested in developing students. He enjoyed controlling them after nearly 40 minutes of training. The students gathered near the center of the mat for water. Ethan reached for his bottle, breathing hard but smiling faintly. He hadn't quit. That alone made Maya proud. Before Ethan could take a drink, Darius called across the room, "Brooks." Ethan immediately looked up. "Stand over here," the teenager obeyed. Without hesitation, Darius faced the entire class. Everyone pay attention. Parents slowly lifted their phones again. Expecting another demonstration, Darius placed one hand on Ethan's shoulder. "This," he announced loudly, "here's exactly what happens when people spend more time behind computer screens than building discipline." A few students laughed. Ethan's smile disappeared instantly. "You've got height," Darius continued, "but absolutely no presence. If confidence could be bought, you'd still be broke." The laughter grew louder. Several children looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Maya noticed Ethan's shoulders slowly sink. She had seen that same body language countless times while speaking with frightened teenagers. During her years as a police officer, it wasn't physical exhaustion, It was humiliation. There was a difference, a very important difference. She drew one slow breath, keeping her expression calm, as her trained eyes stayed fixed on the instructor, carefully watching every word, every movement, and every decision he made. The room grew noticeably quieter as the students formed a wide circle around the center of the mat. Even the younger children sensed that something had changed. What had begun as an ordinary evening class was slowly becoming a public performance, and everyone instinctively knew who the unwilling star of that performance was going to be. Darius slowly walked around Ethan as though inspecting him. He folded his arms and shook his head with exaggerated disappointment. "You know what your biggest problem is?" he asked loudly enough for every parent to hear. Ethan swallowed. "No, sir." "You don't believe in yourself because you've spent your entire life expecting other people to protect you." The words hung in the air. Several parents shifted uncomfortably. Maya remained seated on the bleachers, her expression calm, but her eyes never left her son. Years of military discipline, followed by years wearing a Houston Police Department badge, had taught her that emotional control often revealed more strength than emotional reactions. She had testified in courtrooms, negotiated with armed suspects, comforted frightened children after traumatic incidents, and stood beside families on the worst days of their lives. She knew exactly what intimidation looked like, and she knew exactly when it crossed the line into abuse. Darius clapped his hands once everyone gathered closer. Students moved into a tighter circle. "I need someone to demonstrate a simple defensive throw." His eyes slowly swept across the room. Several experienced students eagerly raised their hands. Darius ignored every one of them. Instead, he pointed directly at Ethan. Fewer quiet murmurs spread through the parents. One father leaned toward another. Poor kid Ethan hesitated only briefly. Before stepping into the center of the mat, his heart pounded against his chest, but he remembered his mother's words from only minutes earlier. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." He took a slow breath across the room. Maya noticed the small change in his posture. He was nervous, but he wasn't running. That alone mattered. Darius stood face to face with him. "Have you ever been thrown before?" "No, sir." I figured a few teenagers laughed. Darius turned toward the audience. "This is exactly why fundamentals matter." He grabbed Ethan's training jacket near both shoulders. "Relax," he said. Ethan tried. Darius suddenly yanked him forward much harder than necessary. The teenager stumbled awkwardly. More laughter echoed through the gym. "See that Darius announced no balance." He looked toward the parents. If someone attacks him on the street, it'll be over before it even starts. Maya slowly uncrossed her arms. Something about Darius's grip bothered her. It wasn't instructional, it was aggressive. Assistant instructors stood nearby. Watching silently, none of them corrected him. None of them intervened years earlier. Maya had trained new police recruits about the responsibility that came with authority. "The moment people trust you with power," she often told them, "your first responsibility is protecting those who protect themselves." Watching Darius now, she wondered if anyone had ever taught him that lesson. Darius repositioned Ethan again. "This time don't resist." "Yes, sir." "You ready?" Ethan nodded. Without warning, Darius exploded into the demonstration. Instead of guiding the movement at beginner speed, he executed the throw almost at full force. His hip rotated violently. His legs swept hard, his upper body drove forward. Ethan's feet left the ground completely. For a split second, the entire gym seemed frozen. Then came the impact. The sound echoed across the building. Ethan crashed onto the training mat, with his shoulder taking most of the force before the rest of his body followed awkwardly. A painful gasp escaped his mouth. Every ounce of air had been driven from his lungs. His eyes widened in panic as he desperately tried to breathe. The room fell silent. Parents who had been recording quietly lowered their phones. One mother instinctively covered her mouth. A younger student whispered, "Is he okay?" Ethan curled onto his side. Clutching his ribs, his face turned pale. He opened his mouth repeatedly, but no sound came out, only frightened. Desperate attempts to inhale. Maya stood, not quickly, not dramatically. She simply stood. Her movements were controlled, deliberate, almost unnervingly calm. Every instinct developed through years as both a Marine and a police officer had activated simultaneously. She wasn't reacting emotionally. She was assessing distance, breathing consciousness, possible injuries, environmental threats. Everything happened within seconds. Darius glanced down at Ethan. Instead of checking his condition, he shrugged. That's why we learn proper technique. No apology, no concern. No offer to help him up. He looked around at the class. Pain teaches faster than comfort. B's sentence struck Maya harder than anything else he had said. All evening she had witnessed real pain. She had watched fellow Marines carry wounded brothers and sisters to safety. Under impossible conditions, she had held the hands of accident victims while waiting for paramedics. She had comforted children after violent crimes. Pain didn't automatically teach. Sometimes pain simply broke people. Compassion was what helped them heal. Darius nudged Ethan's training shoe with the side of his foot. Come on, no response. Get up. Ethan still struggled to breathe. I said, get up. Maya stepped through the small gate, separating spectators from the training floor. Her footsteps were steady, measured completely unhurried. The entire gym watched in absolute silence. Nobody tried to stop her. There was something unmistakable about the way she carried herself. Not arrogance, not fear, authority. The quiet kind that didn't need to announce itself. She reached Ethan first without saying a word. She knelt beside him. One hand gently supported the back of his neck, while the other rested lightly against his shoulder. Breathe with me, sweetheart, she said softly, in through your nose. He tried. That's it. Another slow breath. You're okay. She recognized the symptoms immediately. The wind had been knocked out of him, painful, frightening, but manageable. Her voice never rose. Never shook. Several parents exchanged glances. One father quietly whispered to his wife, she's handled something like this before. Another mother nodded, you can tell. Within half a minute, Ethan finally managed a deep breath before coughing. Color slowly returned to his face. Tears filled his eyes more from shock than pain. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. Maya gently brushed the hair away from his forehead. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. She helped him sit upright before carefully checking his shoulder and ribs once more, with practiced hands. Satisfied that he could move without obvious signs of serious injury, she looked directly into his eyes. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words meant more to Ethan than every insult Darius had thrown at him all evening. Only then did Maya slowly rise to her feet and turn toward the instructor, her calm expression unchanged. As dozens of anxious faces waited to see what would happen next, Maya rose slowly from beside Ethan, keeping one reassuring hand on his shoulder for just a moment before letting him stand on his own. The teenager took a careful breath, still sore but noticeably steadier. Around them the gym remained frozen in silence. The usual chatter of parents had disappeared. Even the younger children sensed they had witnessed something that should never happen inside a place built to teach discipline. Maya looked directly at Darius. Her expression remained calm. There was no anger on her face, no shouting, no trembling. Just the quiet confidence of a woman who had spent decades making difficult decisions under enormous pressure. You used far more force than this lesson required, she said evenly. A beginner trusted you with his safety, and you violated that trust. Darius let out a sarcastic laugh, folding his muscular arms across his chest. Are you serious? He glanced around the room, searching for support from the parents. This is martial arts. People fall. No one answered. The silence irritated him. He continued louder. If someone can't handle a simple throw, maybe this isn't the place for them. Maya never broke eye contact. I've spent enough years training people under pressure to know the difference between instruction and intimidation. Darius smirked. Oh, really? He slowly walked closer, until only a few feet separated them. And where exactly did you become such an expert? Maya answered without hesitation. The United States Marine Corps taught me discipline. A few eyebrows lifted around the room. She continued calmly. Law enforcement taught me responsibility. Several parents exchanged surprised glances. A man sitting near the front quietly whispered, She's a cop. His wife nodded slowly. I think she is. Darius rolled his eyes dramatically. So what you think wearing a badge makes you tough? Maya shook her head. No. It reminds me that every person I meet deserves respect until they prove otherwise. Her voice carried naturally through the building. I've spent years protecting families in this city. I've responded to domestic violence calls, rescued children from dangerous homes, comforted victims after terrible nights, and stood beside officers who risked everything for complete strangers. She paused briefly. Real authority isn't about making people fear you. It's about making people feel safe. Several parents quietly nodded. Those words landed differently. Not because they were loud, because they were true. Darius noticed the crowd beginning to drift toward Maya's side. His pride wouldn't allow it. He stepped even closer. You think this is your courtroom? No, you think this is one of your police briefings? No, you walked into my gym. Maya answered immediately no. My son walked into your gym. The room fell silent again. He came here hoping someone would teach him confidence. Her eyes briefly moved toward Ethan. He didn't come here to become someone's target. Darius scoffed loudly. Oh, here we go, the protective mom speech. He turned toward the students. This is exactly what's wrong with society. Everybody wants feelings. Nobody wants accountability. Maya quietly replied, accountability starts with the person holding authority. That sentence echoed through the gym. Assistant instructors. Todd and Marcus looked down at the floor. Neither man said a word they had watched. Similar moments happened before. Only today someone had finally challenged them. One of the younger students slowly raised his hand. Dad, a little boy whispered from the front row. Coach heard him. His father gently lowered the child's hand, saying nothing. Parents began noticing details they had ignored for months. Children flinching before demonstrations, fear instead of excitement, silence instead of confidence. The atmosphere suddenly looked different. Through fresh eyes, Darius sensed it immediately. His confidence started giving way to frustration. He pointed toward the exit. If you don't like how I teach, leave. We'll be happy without you. Maya looked around the room. Dozens of children, dozens of families, countless opportunities to shape young lives. Then she looked back at Darius. I will leave, she answered softly. But before I do, I want every parent here to ask themselves one question. She slowly turned toward the bleachers. If your child leaves practice afraid of the instructor, if they feel smaller after every lesson, if they mistake humiliation for discipline, ask yourself whether they're learning confidence or simply learning to fear someone stronger. No one moved. No one interrupted. The words settled over the room with surprising weight. A mother quietly reached for her daughter's hand. Another father lowered the phone he had been recording with. Near the reception desk, the gym manager stared nervously toward Darius, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Darius laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. You've got a nice speech, but speeches don't win fights. He pointed toward the center mat. This does, he slapped his own chest proudly. I've got championships, trophies. Black belts, what do you have besides stories? Maya smiled faintly. Experience. The single word unsettled him more than an insult ever could. He stepped closer again. You think you're better than me. I think every instructor should protect the people they teach. You keep talking because you're avoiding something. Darius spread his arms dramatically. If I'm such a terrible martial artist, if I'm such a bully, why don't you prove it? Several parents immediately looked toward Maya. She remained perfectly still. I didn't come here to fight. You came here to accuse me. I came here for my son, same difference. He pointed toward the sparring mats. 5 minutes winner walks away, right? Loser walks away embarrassed. Maya looked at Ethan. He shook his head almost immediately. Mom, let's just go. She nodded gently. That's exactly what I intend to do. She reached for Ethan's gym bag and began walking toward the exit. Each step was slow, peaceful, final. Behind her, Darius's breathing grew heavier. His ego refused to let the moment end. The entire room was watching. He couldn't accept being ignored. You know why you're leaving, he shouted across the gym. Because underneath that badge, underneath all those speeches, you're scared. Maya stopped walking. She didn't turn immediately. The gym became so quiet that even the distant hum of the air conditioning system sounded unusually loud. Every parent, every student, every instructor, every eye remained fixed on the quiet black woman, standing only a few feet from the exit, waiting to see whether dignity would walk out the door, or whether arrogance had just pushed the wrong Marine one step too far. Maya stood motionless near the exit, Ethan's gym bag resting lightly in her hand. She could feel dozens of eyes fixed on her back, waiting to see whether she would answer Darius's challenge or simply walk away years ago, before she ever pinned on a police badge. Her first instinct might have been different, but the Marine Corps had taught her discipline, and law enforcement had reinforced it every single day. Real courage wasn't found in proving strangers wrong. It was found in making the right decision when emotions begged for the opposite. She slowly turned to face Darius. Her expression remained calm. "If I walk away," she asked quietly, "what lesson do these children learn?" Darius smirked. "They learned that the loudest critic couldn't back up a single word." Maya shook her head no. "They learned that adults should solve problems without violence." Several parents nodded. One father quietly whispered, "She's right." Darius heard it. His jaw tightened. He stepped into the middle of the training floor and spread both arms wide. "Everybody's watching." He pointed toward Maya. "You called me a bully. You questioned my professionalism. You embarrassed me in front of my students. If you're so confident," he slapped the center of the mat. "Step right here." The room remained silent. Maya looked toward Ethan. The teenager's breathing had returned to normal, but concern filled his face. "You don't have to do this, Mom." She smiled gently, "No. I don't." Those words surprised nearly everyone in the room. She walked toward Ethan instead of the center mat. She adjusted the collar of his training jacket and spoke softly enough that only he could hear. "Never let another person's pride decide your character." Ethan nodded. "I understand." Maya looked into her son's eyes. "I also want you to understand something else." She glanced toward Darius. "Sometimes protecting people means preventing the next person from getting hurt." Ethan slowly followed her gaze. He looked around the gym. Several younger students appeared frightened. One little girl stood behind her father. Clutching his arm, another young boy stared at the floor. Instead of looking toward his instructor, Maya noticed every face. Years of policing had trained her to read rooms before speaking. Fear leaves fingerprints. She saw them everywhere. She walked toward the reception desk. The young receptionist looked nervous. "Ma'am, I really don't think—" Maya offered a reassuring smile. "I'm not angry." She looked toward the gym manager. "Does your facility have an adult sparring liability waiver?" The manager hesitated. "We do. It's only used for experienced adults." "I'd like to read it." The room erupted into quiet whispers. Darius grinned. "I knew it. I knew all those speeches were leading somewhere." The receptionist reluctantly handed Maya a clipboard. She didn't rush. She carefully read every sentence. Every condition, every responsibility, every legal acknowledgement. That alone impressed several parents. She wasn't acting emotionally. She was thinking like a Marine, like a police officer, like a mother. Finally, she signed her name with steady handwriting before handing the clipboard back. Darius laughed confidently. "Now we're talking." He walked toward the equipment rack and grabbed 2 pairs of sparring gloves. He tossed one pair toward Maya. She caught them effortlessly. After examining them briefly, she placed them neatly on the reception counter. "I won't need these." Confused murmurs spread across the gym. Darius laughed louder. "You planning on losing faster?" Maya calmly removed her gray hoodie. Beneath it was a simple black athletic shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing intimidating. Just practical clothing. As the sleeves settled against her arms, several faded scars became visible near one shoulder. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Simply the quiet marks left behind by years of service. A small Marine Corps emblem tattoo rested near her upper arm. Another faded memorial bracelet circled her wrist. One elderly veteran sitting beside the bleachers noticed immediately. His eyes widened. He slowly stood. "Marine," he whispered almost to himself. His wife looked toward him. "You recognize the tattoo?" He nodded once. "Yes." The room gradually became quieter again. Darius rolled his shoulders dramatically. He bounced lightly on his feet, shadow boxed toward the mirrors, and flashed confident smiles toward the spectators. Maya simply stepped onto the mat. No stretching, no showmanship, no intimidation. She stood naturally with relaxed shoulders and calm breathing. Her hands rested comfortably at her sides. Years of military conditioning had taught efficiency over appearance. Darius circled her confidently. "You still have time to quit." Maya answered calmly. "I've spent most of my adult life avoiding unnecessary fights. Today isn't different." He laughed. "Then why are you standing here?" "Because every child in this room deserves an instructor who understands that strength exists to protect people, not to humiliate them." Those words echoed across the gym. Parents looked toward their own children. Some children looked back with uncertain expressions. The lesson had already become bigger than a sparring match. The gym manager reluctantly stepped forward. This will be controlled, no cheap shots, no attacks after someone is down. Maya nodded respectfully. So will I? Darius cracked his neck. I'm done talking. He raised his fists. His breathing became faster as adrenaline surged through his body. Across from him, Maya inhaled slowly. Years of police training returned effortlessly. Control your breathing, control your heartbeat. Control your decisions. Her heartbeat never seemed to change. She wasn't looking at Darius's fists. She watched his shoulders, his hips, his feet. The subtle movements that always revealed intention before action. The same observation skills had protected fellow officers during dangerous arrests and helped her safely resolve countless violent encounters without unnecessary force. She wasn't preparing to win. She was preparing to end the danger with the least amount of force possible. Darius mistook her stillness for hesitation. A confident grin spread across his face. There it is, I knew you'd freeze. He suddenly exploded forward, launching himself across the mat with the speed and aggression that had overwhelmed countless inexperienced students before, completely convinced that another display of power was only a heartbeat away. Darius charged across the mat with absolute confidence, throwing a fast left jab, followed immediately by a powerful right cross. It was the same aggressive combination that had intimidated dozens of beginners. Over the years, the crowd expected the quiet mother to panic. She never did. Maya made one small step to her left. The jab sliced harmlessly through empty air. The right hand followed with tremendous force, but instead of retreating, Maya calmly moved inside the punch, eliminating most of its power before it could reach her. The movement was so efficient that many people barely realized she had moved at all. Darius blinked in confusion. He immediately spun into a hard roundhouse kick, aimed at her ribs. Again, Maya stayed composed. She shifted her weight, letting the kick pass within inches of her body before planting both feet firmly back on the mat. There was no wasted movement, no unnecessary emotion, only discipline. Parents watched in stunned silence. One father whispered, "She's reading him before he even attacks." The elderly Marine veteran slowly nodded. That's experience. Darius's confidence began slipping away. His attacks became faster, sloppier, angrier. He threw combinations without thinking. Every missed strike consumed more energy. Every failed attack chipped away at his confidence across from him. Maya's breathing remained slow and controlled. She wasn't fighting with anger. She was protecting herself with discipline. The impact echoed sharply across the silent gym. Darius's eyes widened, every muscle in his body suddenly relaxed. His momentum disappeared completely. He collapsed onto the mat without throwing another strike. Silence, complete silence. Nobody cheered, nobody celebrated. Several parents simply stared in disbelief. The gym that had been filled with loud voices only moments earlier now felt almost sacred. Maya slowly lowered her hands. She never celebrated. She never looked toward the crowd. She walked directly to Darius. Carefully kneeling beside him, she checked his breathing exactly as she had done for countless injured people during her years in uniform. She turned toward the assistant instructors. Roll him gently onto his side. Monitor his breathing. If he doesn't regain consciousness within a couple of minutes, call EMS immediately. The instructors moved without hesitation. For the first time that evening, they weren't following Darius. They were following genuine leadership. Maya quietly picked up her gray hoodie and slipped it back on. Once again covering the scars that told stories, she never felt the need to explain. The Marine disappeared beneath ordinary clothing. The police officer became simply a mother again. She walked over to Ethan. The teenager looked at her with tears filling his eyes. You really could have hurt him worse. Maya gently smiled yes. But winning isn't about proving how much damage you can do. It's about knowing when to stop. She placed a caring hand on his shoulder. Promise me something, anything. If you ever become stronger than someone else, use that strength to protect them, never to humiliate them, I promise. Several parents quietly wiped tears from their eyes. One mother hugged her daughter tightly. Another father walked over to his son and simply said, I'm proud of you. The elderly Marine veteran slowly approached Maya. He stood straight before offering a respectful handshake. Semper Fi. Maya smiled warmly. Semper Fi near the reception desk. The gym manager looked around at the families who had witnessed everything. He took a deep breath. Things are going to change here. Several parents nodded in agreement. Over the following weeks, respectful coaching standards replaced intimidation. Parents became more involved in their children's training. Instructors focused on encouragement instead of humiliation, and students began smiling again as they walked through the gym doors. Confidence was no longer built through fear. It was built through patience, discipline, and respect. As for Ethan, he continued training, not because he wanted to become the strongest person in the room, but because he wanted to become the kindest. With every lesson he discovered that true confidence doesn't come from overpowering others. It comes from believing in yourself, even when life tries to convince you otherwise. Maya returned to serving her community as she always had, wearing her police badge with quiet pride. She never told people about that night, because heroes rarely need an audience. She understood that every day offered another opportunity to protect, encourage, and lead by example. The greatest victory that evening wasn't a punch. It was a lesson. A lesson that every child deserved to witness. Real strength stays humble. Real leaders protect the weak. Real champions never abuse their power. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who hopes they never have to fight at all. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. What moment impacted you the most? Do you think Maya made the right decision? Or would you have handled the situation differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective may inspire someone else reading them. And tell us what kind of powerful justice story you'd like to watch. Next.